This morning we're just going to have a bit of a discussion around boundaries. What are boundaries and why do we need them? So especially with younger children, and as they grow older, it's important that we have boundaries. This is just for parents with children, but also in life we have boundaries. You need boundaries in relationships, we need boundaries in work life, we need boundaries in private life. Boundaries are really important. So why do we need boundaries? Well, boundaries are there to also protect you. So you've got your own value system, you know exactly what you want in life, where you want to go, the no's, the yes and the no's for yourself, for your own life. And the boundaries are just there for you to actually keep to those boundaries or those values. So then you can actually allow other persons not to cross your boundaries, not to go into your boundary level, or not to break your own value system. So boundaries are really, really important. The boundaries, according to this woman by name of Senator Catherine, said boundaries can be described as guidelines, rules and limits that a person creates to identify for themselves what are reasonable, safe and permissible ways that other people can behave in their presence. So what are reasonable, permissible and safe ways that other people can actually operate in your presence. So what's safe for you? What's good for you? What will you allow? What won't you allow? Those are the things that you set up in your boundaries. And you are very clear with your boundaries. So a person will know that I don't accept it if you do this, or if you speak a specific way to me, or if that is not acceptable. So boundaries, the easiest way to explain personal boundaries is to define where a person ends and others begin. They are defined as emotional space a person gives to other people. So that's the emotional and physical space that a person gives to other people. So what you do is that you will, in your boundary, allow a person specific things in your presence, or also in your emotional world or in your physical world. And the boundaries are there to keep people in place or in check so that they don't cross those boundaries. That is also important for when you have children. For children, boundaries are important because first of all, boundary will allow the kid a specific area. This is mom and dad, and the kids, and the kids will need to know what boundaries are in place for them and which boundaries are not. So what they can do, a safe space for them to play in. So a boundary, like if you've got your house, your boundary line in your house is also there for a kid to know this is where I am safe. I'm safe in my house, or I'm safe in my backyard. That boundary is there to protect me. Same with families, same with emotions, same with the physical. So the boundaries are there to actually physically protect you emotionally, and protect you also physically. A lot of people have an issue with boundaries or setting boundaries. We live in an age where we like to give kids more responsibility, or would like to give them more input in our own lifestyle. But the problem is that sometimes we give them so much that we actually give them control. So listen to this statement which is found on the Utopia website. It says, there are parents who believe that it is good to let children share in decision making, but the downside is that it can lead to giving too much power and control to the child, resulting in the opposite what the parents are hoping to achieve. The only way sharing power and control is most effective when the parents have well-established limits and boundaries in place. So we need well-established boundaries and limits. The key is the well-established. well-established boundaries. It means that they set there. The kids know what the boundaries are, and they know not to cross it. So they know what will happen, what will the consequence be if I cross this boundary. So that's why it's important that the parents would sit together before they define the boundaries. Is they first of all have to say, what do I see as boundaries, and where do I go with my boundaries? What do I want the kids to keep as a boundary, and what is okay for them not to have a boundary for. Boundaries are also able to change according to the age of the kid, the emotional and physical growth in the child or in the person that you are actually putting within these boundaries. So, for example, the boundaries for a 5-year-old will be different from the boundaries of a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. Boundaries are different, and also when you set your boundaries, with your boundary also set your consequence. For example, if you tell your child, if you say lying, if you tell a lie, there will be a 5-minute timeout. Lies are 5 minutes. This is just an example. You can have your own boundary towards and your own consequence. So first of all, the first boundary is a 5-minute timeout. So let's say stealing is 10 minutes. Right. As the child gets older, when this doesn't really, like if you've got a 15 or a 16-year-old and say, I'm going to put you in 5-minute timeout, they will laugh at you. But if you say for a kid, let's say for your teenager, lying means 1 day, no Wi-Fi. That will again get them to really take into consideration, wow, this is quite a consequence. 1 day without Wi-Fi at home, for some people that is like really almost like the end of the world. But for other kids, it's like if you've got a kid who's an outside kid who doesn't even mind about Wi-Fi, that'll be nothing. So for them it would probably be 10 pages of math. For example, 10 pages of math in a special book that you have, a math book or an exercise book or whatever. So you can set your own boundaries according to your kids, according to what you know boundaries will be for your kids. For example, if you've got a teenager, a 16-year-old teenager, and he, for example, goes and he slams the door. Maybe the way to teach him that boundary is to take off the door for a week. Remove the door and say, to have a door in your room is a privilege, it's not a must. And in that case, I am removing the door for a full week. That is just one sort of boundary. That's a boundary that I actually used with my own kids. Is you slam the door, I remove the door. I heard a story of another father. He actually told his kid, he gave his kid's got a driving license, and he gave the kid a car. And he also started to say, all right, I've got a curfew for you. If you go out on a Saturday, you need to be home at 11:30. First time the kid broke the boundary, the dad gave him a warning. The second day, the kid broke this boundary. The next morning when the kid woke up, the car's wheels were removed by the dad and said, I've given you a car, but to have wheels is a privilege. I'm taking away this privilege for the next week because you don't keep the boundaries. So the sort of consequence would have to be adjused according to what the boundary is, what the age of the child is, what the circumstances are. And so that's why it's also important that when you do the boundary thing with your child is to take into consideration what do you want to teach him, what do you want to teach her. Also with relationships, we need boundaries. Certain people are not allowed to cross my personal space. Even within marriages, we have boundaries. First of all, is like a boundary crossing is chats with other people. even romantic chats, romantic dates. That is not allowed. Within a marriage, the boundary is there. It's like respect me, respect my marriage. I've got boundaries. Once you start breaking those boundaries, once you start overstepping those boundaries, it's the beginning of an issue. So it's interesting that with boundaries, we have something called the 10 Commandments of Boundaries. So 10 Commandments of Boundaries, and this was created by two guys, Cloud and Townsend. So you can just Google Cloud and Townsend, the 10 Commandments of Boundaries. So the first law of boundary is reaping and sowing. So reaping and sowing. This is something that you teach your child. Reaping and sowing. You know that what you reap, what you sow, you'll reap. So if you sow disobedience, you're going to reap a consequence. If you sow obedience, if you stay within the boundary, you will reap a reward, or you will reap acceptance of acknowledgement of what you've done. So sowing and reaping. So what you sow, you'll reap. So the first law of boundaries is the reaping and sowing boundary. Law number 2 is the law of responsibility. So number 1 is reaping and sowing. Number 2 is responsibility. With this one, we say that each person is responsible for himself or herself. The child needs to know that he is responsible for his own actions, and no one is forcing him to overstep or keep these boundaries. So a child can't keep on saying stuff like, he made me do it, she made me do it. They need to know the law of responsibility. I am responsible for my own actions. A few years ago, we had the case of the cricket captain of South Africa, Hansie Cronje, and he was caught into a match-fixing scandal, and with a big commission and a court case, he came up with this excuse. He said, the devil made me do it. Which is not true, is your pride made me do it. Your hunger for money made you do it. You need to take responsibility for your own actions. So children need to know and learn the law of responsibility. The third law is the law of power. Number 3 is power. The third law is the law of power. With the law of power, we say that we have the power to change ourselves and not other people. So the only power that I have is the power over myself. I don't have, even in relationships, in marriages, it's not my role to change my spouse. It's not my role to change my partner, to change my girlfriend. In your relationship, you have the power over yourself. So you have the power to say no when there's too much jobs coming your way. You have the power also to stay within your boundaries. The child needs to change to adapt to the situation, and not other people need to change to adapt to the child's situation. Which is, when a child is small, you find that all the attention actually goes towards the child. If you just take a look at situations where there are a little baby in the presence in the room, everyone's focusing on the baby. Oh, he's so cute, she's so cute. The conversation is about the baby. And then when that baby gets older and they come to sit in the same conversation or in the same room, suddenly the focus is not on the baby, and the baby's starting to throw little tantrums because I need attention. So with this is, the whole conversation had to change to focus on the baby or on the child. So in this case, the child needs to know, or needs to learn with this, is with the power is, the whole conversation and the whole focus of everything and everything around me doesn't have to focus on me or adapt to me. I need to adapt to the situation. So if I come into a room and there are people chatting, I have to take part in what they are talking about. I don't have to change the conversation to what I want to talk about. So the rule of power is that the place where I have power is just when it comes to myself. Where there's other people involved, they have power of their own situations, and I don't play a role in the change, or I don't play a role in what they are thinking and what they are doing. So my power is just on myself, how I think and what I do. I cannot influence other people or force other people to actually think the way I do. And that's why we get in so many relationships, also in relationship counseling, we get this situation where one of the partners, want to change the other person. I want him to be more like my dad. I want her to be more like this, or I want her to be more loving. I want her to be more that. You can actually say to her, can we work on being more loving, or can we work on this? But you cannot change them, because that change, that power to change is within themselves. And when you start forcing people to change, we're starting to get into a place of manipulation and control and all sorts of unhealthy situations that is not healthy for a relationship. This is also not healthy for parents and children's relationships, but most importantly, it's not healthy in the marriage. So we need to know that if I want to see change in my marriage, I need to change. I need to find the areas that need change in my marriage, and I need to start doing that. I can have discussions with my wife or my spouse in that regard. It's always good to go to a counselor, a marriage counselor. It's always good, even if there's no issue with your marriage. Don't go to the counselor when there's an issue. Get into the habit of just having a counselor, and once every 3 months or so, if there's no issue, go and see your counselor. If there are an issue, make it more often, once a month. If it's really serious, once a week. But it all depends on what your situation is. But get into the habit to talk about stuff and talk over stuff and work through stuff before they become a crisis. So the law of power is that I only have power over myself. I only have power to change, and I can't change anyone else. So that's the law of power. The next one, the fourth law, and which is really important, is respect. The law of respect. We need respect in all aspects of life. We need respect in our relationships. We need respect in our child-parent relationships. We need the child to respect the parent, but we also need the parent to respect the child. At work, wherever we go, we need respect. The law of respect says we accept the boundaries of other people. By accepting the boundaries set by people, the child will also learn what is to respect other people. So if I accept your boundary, if I accept this is a no-go zone for you. So for example, if you're in a work situation and one of your colleagues is swearing a lot, you can have a discussion with that person and say, I don't want you to talk the way you do or use foul language in my presence. That is a boundary that you set. That person will respect that boundary by not swearing in your presence. So that is respect. That is the law of respect, is I keep to my boundaries. I respect you enough not to swear in your presence. That's the same thing with kids. I respect you, that's why I will keep to my promises. That's why I'll do the dishes. That's why I'll keep my room clean. That's why I'll talk to you with respect, because I respect you. And also in return, you also would respect me then for doing that. So the fourth law is the law of respect. The fifth law is the law of motivation. So the fifth law when it comes to boundaries is motivation. So the law of motivation drives behavior. Parents need to teach a child to do the right things for the right reasons and not because of the fear of punishment. So You respect your parents because it's the right thing to do, not because you are scared that they are going to punish you. So the law of motivation is I do things for the right reasons and not because I'm scared or I have fear because of punishment. So the law of motivation is, why do you do it? Do you do it because you're scared of punishment, or do you do it because you want to do it, you want to please, you want to stay within your boundaries, you want to feel safe in your boundaries? So the motivation, why do you do it? So this is also sometimes a quite important question to ask a child when they actually broke a boundary is, why did you break this? Why did you take that? Why did you speak the way you did? So that they can actually just reflect on that question of why. Why do you talk the way you do? Why do you speak? Why do you do the things you do? For what was the reason that you actually broke that specific boundary? So the first 5 laws is, number 1, the law of reaping and sowing. Second law is the law of responsibility. Third one is the law of power. Fourth one is the law of respect. And then the fifth law is the law of motivation. And the law of motivation is, why do I do this? Do I do it because I want to please? Or do I do it because I'm scared of getting into trouble? Or why do you do and keep to your boundaries? So the 6th law, number 6, is the law of evaluation. So the law of evaluation. So the law of evaluation states, accept that our personal boundaries may cause pain to other people. Personal boundaries might cause pain to other people because their values and your values are not the same. The result might be that because of our values are not the same. I have friends who like to go out to nightclubs. My values is I don't do that. I don't go to nightclubs, or I don't live a life where I drink or use drugs or anything like that. So in the process, I keep on saying no to my friends because they upset with me for not coming with them, for not doing what they do. That causes pain to them, emotional pain, because they want to spend time with you. You keep on saying no, you keep on rejecting them. So evaluation is, sometimes you need to ask yourself, is it worth staying in this friendship? Is it worth that I have friends with these people and I keep on rejecting them? Same with the other thing is it worth for me to be friends with people that I don't really want to associate with? You know, the saying says that if you sleep with dogs, you wake up with fleas. Ask yourself, is it worth me being associated with these people? So evaluate your state. Evaluate the things that you're doing. Evaluate what your friends are doing, and also look on what is the impact of what they're doing on your own life, on you, on your friendships, on your own physical state, your mental health state. Does that make you feel sad? Will it cause you to break your own boundaries? Will it cause you to break your own values? If it's not a good situation for you, rather step away. Rather say to those friends that, rather not ask me again to go to club, or rather not ask me to go drinking with you or anything like that. Or when you come to my house, I don't want you to actually swear in front of my children. Or so evaluate the situations and ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth being friends with these people? Sometimes ask yourself, am I too strict on my kids? Is my boundaries sometimes too strict on them? Why do they keep on breaking these boundaries? Is it because they struggle because I'm too strict, I'm too harsh, or is it just because they don't want to accept my authority? So there's a lot of evaluation that needs to happen with the law of evaluation, and that is a lot of questions that you need to ask is why. It's also good to, when you set your boundaries for your kids, actually to evaluate your boundaries every 2-3 months to say, all right, is this working? Is the punishment working? Or rather, not use the word punishment, but is the consequences not working? Is it too harsh? Is it too light? Are they too big for this specific sort of consequence? So ask yourself, evaluate from time to time what your boundaries are, especially when it comes to your kids. The law 7 is the law of proactivity. The law of proactivity. Now, the law of proactivity says to us that proactive people make decisions before events happen. So be proactive. So before something happens, you are already prepared for it. So what does the law state further? It says children do not come by deliberate thought out action naturally. The child needs to learn the difference between mature and immature boundaries. It is the task of the parent to develop the child's ability to set appropriate boundaries without exploding or being impulsive. So the child needs to learn from the parents how to keep to those boundaries. So the parent needs to sit with the child and say, these are the boundaries, and the child needs to learn not to explode and get angry when we set these boundaries. So be proactive means that we set stuff before they happen. So before we see there's going to be trouble or we see there's going to be a problem, set the boundaries. Be proactive. Rather set the boundary before the issue started than after the problem really created. If you see your child drives recklessly, rather set a boundary which can save their life in the future. So it's important that you are proactive. So law 7 is the law of proactivity. So in the law of proactivity, you decide on an action before there is a problem, before there's a crisis, before there's an issue, before there's really an issue for future that might bring harm to your child, to yourself, to your relationship with other people. So be proactive. That's law number 7. Law number 8 is the law of envy. Law of envy. The law of envy says envy makes the child feel not good enough or entitled. The opposite of envy and entitlement is gratitude. Parents who set boundaries help the child to work through their feelings of entitlement and envy to a position of gratitude. So when a kid gets all the attention when they're small, they start to become in a place where they really feel like they're entitled. I have to do it. I have to. It's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That little girl in the factory, when she was on the tour, every time she sees something she wants, she says, "Daddy, I want that. Daddy, I want that." And how many kids are like that little girl? I want that. I want that. How many adults are still in that place? I want that, even if they can't afford it. Like, I want that car. I go and buy that car, or I make debt, but I can't afford it, and in the future it causes me hardship because I lose the car, the bank takes the car away. So there's lots of stuff happening there. So the law of envy is a law where I say I want stuff now. Boundaries teach a kid not to actually feel entitled, but a place of gratitude. I'm thankful for what I have. I'm thankful that my parents actually provide me with the needs, or the stuff I need. I'm thankful for. So it's also important that in your boundary process with your child, also with yourself, in your home, your spouse, your personal life, work life, everywhere, you need to get a bit of a spirit of gratitude. I am thankful instead of I am entitled. I need to get this. This is, you owe me. My parents owe me. My mom and dad owe me. The work, my boss, he must give to me. Everyone around me must do stuff for me. Move from that entitlement place where everything revolves around you, because surprisingly enough, we are not the center of the universe.
surprisingly enough, your child will one day realize that they are not the center of the universe. Sometimes it's really difficult to actually get to the place where you realize that I'm not the center of the universe. The world does not revolve around me. So boundaries sort of teach you this, and especially the law of envy is like, okay, there's stuff that I really want, but I can't have it immediately. I need to start saving, I need to make a plan, I need to organize stuff. I don't just get everything immediately. So make sure that your life is not a life of envy, but one of gratitude. And my question to you today is, what are you thankful for? What makes you thankful that you're alive? What makes you thankful that you've got this amazing day ahead of you? What makes you thankful that, I mean, if we look at all the stuff in the world happening, and I mean, it's only like a small percentage of the world that actually has a roof over their head. A small percentage of the world that can actually afford going to school. Not even talking about people that own motor vehicles, and even the most basic little half rusted little car, for some people will be the best thing ever because they can't afford a car, they can't afford nothing. For some people, just to have a bicycle, a push bike, that's already something great. So we have so much to be thankful for. Living in a first world country, it's so much that we just take for granted. So let's change our lives to finding gratitude in stuff. Be thankful for every day. Every morning you wake up, you're thankful. I know people that when it rains, they complain. When that same person the next day when it's hot, they complain. Live a life of gratitude. I mean, to be alive, to just experience, to say, wow, it's hot, means like, wow, you're alive. Dead people don't feel this. So let's live a life of gratitude instead of envy. And boundaries help us to teach our kids gratitude instead of envy. The next law, the law number 9, is the law of activity. And the law of activity says that boundaries can only be created by asking, seeking, and knocking. People are responders to initiators. One of the reasons people have boundary issues is due to the lack of initiative and passivity. So boundary issues is we've got a lack of initiative and passivity. So what we say with this law is laws are only created, or boundaries can only be created by asking, seeking, and knocking, which means that we see there's an issue, so we have to create this boundary. And by creating the boundary, we get people involved in the process, whether it's yourself or other people. Like if it's just a personal boundary, this boundary is also there for other people. So when people come too close to you, you can actually set that into action. So there's activity involved in boundaries. Activity is an issue for many people. And it says here that some people have boundary issues because they're just passive. It's just, this is my boundary, but it's okay if you break it. I don't like it if you swear in my presence, but that's okay, I'm not going to confront you to it. So I'm going to be just passive and not worry about things happening. So what I want to say to you today is make sure your boundaries are set and make sure that you are active with your boundary. So if someone starts breaking your boundary, you start to act on it. So many parents set boundaries for their kids. Don't speak that way, don't swear, don't hurt your brother, don't hurt your sister. But when they actually break that boundary, nothing happens. So then they move into a place of being passive, where the only way for a boundary to actually work is a place where you're active. To knock means you're active. To seek or search means you're active. To ask means you're active. To not take any action means you're passive. So if you have boundaries set with your children, boundaries in your personal life, boundaries at your work, and you realize that you can't keep those boundaries, maybe one of the reasons is that you actually don't act on your boundaries. you're not active when it comes to your boundaries. You don't say to people, stop, I don't like this, or I don't cross that boundary, or no. Even in work life, some people keep on adding work and work and work to your load, and you just take it on, although you can't cope and you're close to burnout. The important thing here is to actually take action and say, no, stop, I can't do it now, I'm not. So that's part of being active with your boundaries. So, and then the 10th one, the last law of boundaries is exposure. The 10th law is the law of exposure, which means that boundaries need to be communicated clearly. Sorry. If people don't know what your boundary is, they will not keep to your boundary. If your children does not know what your boundaries are, they will not keep to the boundary. So communicate your boundary. Say no. Say it's not accepted. Say it's not going to happen. Be very clear on what your boundary is and how you're going to keep communicating your boundary. So the last part is exposure. And the only reason people will, or only way people will know what your boundary is if you are actually clear about it. If you actually talk about it. If you actually speak about it. So it's important that you are clear on what your boundaries are. So how do I set up boundaries for my kids? The starting point is setting up boundaries. Number one is rules. What are the rules in your house? Obviously the ones that's the rules in your house would be the ones that your boundaries are based on. Stealing, no, not hurting, no bullying, whatever your boundaries are, set them up. Number one, that's your starting point. Second step would be to decide how you're going to hold this boundary. So first boundary is we decide on what our boundaries is. Number two is how do you hold the boundary. So how do you hold your boundary? With this one, we also add to what will happen if you don't hold this boundary. So what are the consequences to this boundary being broken? It's important to decide what the tools will be that you're going to use to help your child. For example, redirection, warnings, and then also timeouts. So with this, you need to know how. So how we say is redirection, warnings, timeouts. So redirection is, no, don't do that, be careful. Warning is, I warn you, do not speak to mum like that. And then, okay, fine, 5-minute timeout. So how are you going to do this? And how many warnings are you actually going to have? There are parents who's warning so many times, like saying so many times, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. I'm going to punish you, I'm going to punish you, I'm going to punish you. Just take some time and when you walk into a shopping center or in a shop, how many times parents are warning their kids and how many times they actually act on that warning. You can clearly see the way some children act, that there are never ever they move from warning to timeout or to consequence. Consequence. What's your consequence? Consequences are different for every kid, as we said earlier. So, first of all, we start with what setting up boundary is rules. With these rules, it's clearly that mom and dad needs to define them. Mom and dad needs to agree on them. There's no way in having rules if mom and dad's rules are actually different. If mom is not so tense on being talked to with respect as dad is, we might have a bit of a clash. So it's important that mom and dad agree on the rules. And then also on the punishment, or as I would rather say consequence. Mom and dad must agree on the consequence because both of them need to enforce this consequence. If If swearing is a 5-minute timeout, it's a 5-minute timeout. It's not a 2-minute timeout with mom and a 6-minute timeout with dad. It's a 5-minute timeout in general. So it needs to stay the same. Third thing we need to ask is, what will you do if it feels that you cannot hold the boundary? Because you need to know that you have to hold this boundary actually for the sake of the child. Because you are teaching the child something specifically in this process. So what are you going to do to hold this boundary? How are you going to keep to this boundary? And that's the question that we are asking you today is like, for some people it's easy to set up the boundaries, but it's very difficult for some to actually hold the boundary, to actually enforce the boundary. But know that it's important for the child that you do this, because the child will learn that boundaries are there and you need to keep within them, otherwise there's going to be a consequence. That will also help the child to be a good citizen in the end, because knowing that there are certain laws and we don't break those laws because we actually don't want to break those laws, because it helps us to be good people in a good society and make everything work well. And we don't teach our child that not to break these laws in fear of being punished. So we need to make sure. So if you can't keep the boundary, why can't you keep the boundary? So evaluate your boundary, evaluate yourself, evaluate the circumstances, have a chat to mom and dad as a couple, have a chat to see what's going on there, and why can't we keep, or why can't one of us keep this boundary. Define your plan, okay? Alright, so define your plan. This is what we're going to do, this is our boundaries, this is how we implement it, this is what's going to happen if they break the boundaries, these are the consequences. So just define it. Make sure that every person in the family, mom, dad, children, if Gran lives in the house or some other family members live in the house, that everyone knows what the plan is. Everyone knows what the boundary plan is. Everyone will know how to keep to those boundaries. So that's quite important. And then what will your child learn? 5 is, what will child learn if they push against the boundary? So that's what children will do, is as they grow up they will start pushing against the boundaries. What will they learn? Will they learn that mom and dad can just be changed any way I want them to change? Or can I learn that, will they learn that mom and dad is really set and know what they mean, and also are strict and have a plan and I can trust them? Or will they just learn that no matter what mom and dad says, they'll change it anyway? So what will the child learn if they start pushing against the boundaries? And remember, when they start becoming teenagers, that's what they'll do, because that's their job. Because when they get to be teenagers, they will try and bend the rules, will try and change the boundaries. And this is also where you start to also get into the evaluation process. Does this boundary still work? Does the consequence still work? How do I change stuff around so that it can be to the best of my child's ability, but also to the best of the peace in my house? So that's just a few things regarding boundaries. The most important thing that you need to know is children want boundaries. Boundaries make them feel safe. Just always think of a little child playing in the backyard with a high fence. He is safe within that boundary. No one can touch him within that boundary. So remember that it's sometimes we feel as parents it's quite harsh for us to implement the boundaries. It's quite harsh for us to say no, but remember, in the end it's for the child's safety, or it's for the benefit of the child. So how are you going to implement your boundaries? good luck on the process. It's also not only to the benefit of the child, but also to the benefit of you as a parent, to the benefit of the whole situation at home, to have good and secure and safe boundaries. So you can read more about boundaries on the websites and on the internet, but it's important that we start living a life also where we have boundaries. In your personal life, in your romantic life, in your marriage, in your parenting life, work life, we always need boundaries. And start defining your boundaries, start setting your boundaries, and make people aware of what your boundaries are. Have a good day, and keep setting those boundaries.